So for this project here, I bought the wood materials from Hobby Lobby, and the 3 16th by ½ inch was $3.99, and then the other strip that I got, you'll see later on, was $3.49. So about $7 or $8 just for the wood. And if I hadn't messed up cutting one of the beams on here, I estimated 10 cars out of the package, because there's 2 strips per package. But because I messed up the length on a couple of them, that shortened it out, so I won't get that many cars out of this. But that's what I originally was going to do. And then the trucks for this are arch bar, because arch bar is what typically is used for logging cars in the old days. They didn't use the kind of freight trucks that you see on box cars and flat cars and stuff. They used arch bars. I think that might have started in the 1920s or maybe even before then. And I got them from Pack Rat Hobby Shop in Gridley, California. I don't remember what we paid for them. And I got the wrong ones. I got ones that already had the coupler attachment on it, so you can put a longer log on there. But I only needed the trucks, so I ended up having to cut those off so I could just get down to the trucks. But I like KD, not just because I was born and raised in Oregon and that's where their company is based, but actually I like them because they're metal, and I feel they're more durable. And I like their couplers because they trail better with the trains, having other cars coupled behind them. So they're expensive compared to everything else, but they're made to last, and that's pretty much mainly what that company does, is make couplers and trucks. They also have a few cars here and there too. So what I'm doing with this Dremel saw is I am cutting out a notch wide enough to put a coupler box in there on each end of this boom. And so I'm going back and forth with this saw to cut it down, and then I'm regularly checking to make sure I don't cut all the way through, because I actually did that on another one and I had to start over. So you see me dragging the saw back and forth as I cut it down to coupler height. I do have a coupler gauge from NMRA that can check to make sure it's the right height. So I also have been checking coupler height in between doing this as well. And the couplers are not directly screwed into this wood. They're into a box and then into the wood, because I'm using 148 whisker couplers from KD. That's the ones I like the most. I was using number 5s, and I like number 5s for some of the freight and the F7s, but my favorite ones are 148 whiskers from KD. And so I just kind of take this slowly, a little bit at a time, dragging that saw and whittling that wood down to make a notch. Now from this point, because the saw is round, I have a rounded end. So I'm going to take this Dremel bit, I'm going to switch bits, and this is like a sander type grindstone bit, and I'm going to work it back and forth the opposite way of that blade so I can make it squared off inside there and make it perfectly square to fit the box that the coupler is going to go into. So I'm making my own little ditches, I guess you could call it, on each end of this log car. So I'm pushing it back, you can kind of see it in the picture, pushing it back towards my finger there, and then that flat end of that bit will make the rest of that little curved part in there flat too, that the saw had made, because the saw does make a curve on each end, but that will lift up your coupler and then you won't have the coupler height that you need. So this is the way you get it down so it's even with your see right there, go back and forth and see it squares off the end there in the back. You don't need to do it so much in the front. You might need a little bit, but not as much in the front. It's mostly in the back where it's arched. So now we're getting ready to mount the coupler boxes for a rough fit in here, and I have my box of different sizes that I've accumulated over time. Sometimes I scavenge some of them off of cars that are trashed and can't be kept, but the couplers might be good. And I don't have the correct box for the 148s. I thought that I did, but I don't. I forget which Kadee coupler this box goes to, so I had to modify it and clip off the little wings on the side to get it to fit in this little nook that I got, and then mount my 148s inside, which was not easy to do at all. And I looked to see if there is a coupler assembly kit, and they make them, but they do not make them for 148 whiskers. They make them for number 5s and 2 other kind, but not the whiskers. So I put this coupler on the part of the box where that stem sticks up through it, and rugged it around that, and then slid the other box over the top to push the little wings for the whiskers against the inside. And I am not gluing this down because sometimes these couplers wear out over time and they break and other things can happen to them. They are pretty indestructible because they're metal, but they sometimes have problems. And so if I need to replace them for whatever reason, I want to be able to take this box back off of here and open it up and put another coupler in there. So that's why I chose not to glue this to the log car. Everything on here is going to be screwed down and put in that way. So these screws that are going in are M2 by 16. 16 is the length. And M stands for mini. So if you go to Ace Hardware Store or True Value, I got these ones at Ace. Look for minis, and that's where you'll find the screws that fit through these coupler boxes. I had to do a lot of searching to find the right size to get in there, and so that's what you'll need. And then you'll need the nuts that go on the end of those as well, and they have that in the same box at Ace Hardware in the nuts and bolts section. On this part here, I have marked out 1 inch from the ends. You can kind of see the pencil marks there. And I will be putting a center punch in the middle of those marks. And that center punch is where I'm going to drill my holes to mount my trucks to. These trucks are a little bit different. They have some kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but it's like a Let me see, I'm looking at the picture here. It's called a insulated bushing. So that goes in, and then on top of that goes a gray washer to keep the friction between the car and the truck under control. And that is the other reason why I'm using this size screw, the M2s, because it will fit through that insulated washer hole. You can use bigger ones like you would have for regular freight trucks on box cars, but this one, because it happens to have that, I have to use the smaller diameter M2s on it. This is the rough assembly before paint, making sure that all the parts are fitting together and the way they're supposed to. You can see that there's bunks that have been cut and been put in place, and they're getting ready to be painted as well. You can buy the bunks from Kadee if you want to, but this is nothing fancy that I'm doing. If you want to get heavy detailed, you could go that route, but I'm just doing enough to satisfy myself on this project here. So I'm making my own bunks for this log car, and bunks are what you call the part where the logs rest on. It's the same for log trucks as well. They have bunks on their trucks that the logs sit into, same as log cars. So everything looks like it is fitting together the way it should, and so now it's ready for paint. I had a hard time with painting this with my airbrush because I had bought a used compressor that belonged to a salon on eBay, and I paid $40 for it, and it sat in storage for a year or two. I finally dug it out to use it for this project for the first time, and the pump didn't work. So then I had to get my regular 1 gallon compressor and use that instead. And the hose is extra long, so it takes a little longer for the paint to come through. So it kind of delayed this project as well, because I was waiting for adapter piece to go onto that salon pump to use to come from my local hobby shop, which is A-Main Hobbies here in Chico, and finally came and then hooked it up and it didn't work. So kind of a waste of money there. And you can see the paint thinner over to the side. The bottle says that you don't have to thin it down, you can use it straight from the bottle, but I found that didn't work, so I did have to put some thinner in there. And I used regular thinner. I don't know if that's what airbrush people want or not, but it worked for me and I had no problems with it. I had it left over from the hardware store. So here I'm cutting the wedges that go on the ends of the bunks that hold the logs in and keep them from rolling off the ends. And so I'm using the same kind of wood that I used for the frame. And then these will get glued on with regular Elmer's glue. I'd love to use some of the CA glue or the super glue, but I don't have any on hand, so the best I had on hand was just regular old Elmer's glue, and it works for a variety of applications. And so now we come to the final assembly here, and what everything will look like when it's put together. And these are just a simple little project. I'm not going for the detail accuracy with everything that my grandfather put on his. He built a whole bunch of these. They all got wrecked and destroyed when his shelf unit fell down. But he put a whole lot more detail in his log cars than I have on mine. He put chains and brakes and hand brakes, and he put all kinds of just stuff like you'd have on a normal one. Mine is very bare bones because I'm I'm not running that type of a layout or operation, so. But you can certainly put a whole lot more detail on than I'm doing, and I'm sure a lot of people will. They'll probably put brakes on there, and I'm going to put some chains on for my logs because I have to hold them on somehow. But that's about as far as I will go with details beyond this point.